Hi everyone, this is Angel with Tech Tutelage, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to quickly install Matrix server on Oracle Cloud free tier instance. So the first thing that you want to do is go ahead and log into your Oracle Cloud account, and you're going to want to go ahead and create new instance. I'm going to call my instance Matrix. Then I'm going to scroll down, and here I'm going to go ahead and change my image, and I will use the latest available Ubuntu version. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to pick this one, 2204. So I'm going to go ahead and click on select image, and I'm going to keep the shape to the recommended ampere. And one thing to mention here is because Matrix server does not run on ARM, and this is an ARM instance, I'm going to be using Docker and a Docker container. So just so you're aware, we're going to be doing this with Docker. So I'm going to go ahead and keep scrolling down here. And for VCN, I'm going to keep my default since I only have one VCN. Same thing with the subnet, but if you have multiple VCNs and multiple subnets, make sure that you pick the one that you want your instance to be created in. I'm going to scroll down here, and now here I'm going to do something that maybe not all of you need to do. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this box because I don't want to get an automatically assigned public IP. The reason I don't want that IP is because I already have a reserved IP and a DNS record for this matrix.techtutelage.net domain that points to my reserved IP. And so that is why I don't want to get automatic public IP. I will use my reserved IP. But if you don't have a reserved IP, you're going to want to have this checked here, okay? And then you're going to have to go and create a DNS record later with your DNS provider, but again, in my case, I will uncheck that. So if you don't have reserved IP, make sure you have a checkbox here. In my case, I will leave this unchecked. I'm going to keep scrolling down. If you don't have a public-private key pair, you're going to want to go ahead and generate a new key pair by clicking on these two buttons here that will generate new key pairs and it will download them to your machine. I believe I do have currently a public key pair in my machine, so I'm going to go ahead and upload the ones that I already have. So you can do that by selecting your public key and clicking on that upload button here, and that will upload your public key to the server. Keep scrolling down. You can leave everything else here by the defaults unless you of course want to change something. So in my case, that looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on create. And that should start provisioning my instance. And while I'm waiting for my instance to start, there's a couple more things that we need to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and assign a public IP for my instance. Now, if you checked that checkbox earlier to get automatic public IP, you shouldn't have to do this step. But in my case, I want to assign my reserved IP as a public IP to my instance. So I'm going to go and quickly do that. And I'm going to show you how to do that in case you're in the same situation as me. So to do that, you want to scroll down here on the left and you can click on attached VNIX. And then from here, you can select your matrix primary VNIC. And yours may be called different. I'm sorry, I said Matrix, but that's the name of mine. Anyway, then you can scroll down here and select IPv4 addresses. And down here, we see your private IP address. You can go ahead and click on the three dots here on the right side, and you can click on edit. And once you're here in this edit private IP window, you can go ahead and select reserved public IP. And here from the drop down, I'm going to select my reserved IP address. And you can go ahead and click update. And now if I go back to my instance, you're going to see that now I have a public IP. And there's one more thing I want to do here while the instance is provisioning is I'm going to go to virtual cloud networks here. And I'm going to have to set up a inbound rule to allow a couple of ports that we need for our Matrix server. So I'm going to go here on the left side and I'm going to click on security lists. And I'm going to select my default security list here. And then here I'm going to add two ingress rules. And I'm going to allow access to my server from everywhere on the internet. So 0000/0. And the two ports that I want to open will be 8008 and 8448. Now I'm just going to open 8008 temporary just for testing purposes. But later we can go ahead and shut this one down and we should only have 8448 running as that's the secure way to do it. You don't want to have unencrypted communication that's running out on the internet. So this is just a temporary here. And if you want, you can give it a description here. So a few years from now, you know what you open these ports for. So I'm just going to say here Matrix. So that will give you a little reminder later why you open these two ports. I'm going to go ahead here and click Add Ingress Rules, and that should add the two rules down here. And at this point, we should be ready. So I'm going to go back to my instances, and I'm going to check and see if my instance is ready for me to SSH into it. And as you can see, my instance is all green and it says that it's running, so I can go ahead and try to SSH into it. To SSH into your instance, all you have to do is type SSH-I and give it a path to your private key. And in my case, that key is in my download directory. So I'm going to say downloads and the name of my key. And you can follow by that the username that you'll be connecting with. And since we're using Ubuntu, that will be username Ubuntu. That is the default user on all Ubuntu instances on Oracle Cloud. And that will be followed either by the IP address of your server or by your domain name. And in my case, since as I showed you earlier, I already have a DNS entry, I can just go ahead and instead of typing the IP, if I type my domain name, I should be able to connect to that server. Oh, and I hate when this happens, so let me go ahead and clean it up a little bit. That has to do something with the clipboard, not sure what it is. Anyway, so once you have all this typed in, you can go ahead and hit enter, and here you can say yes, and you should be in your server shortly. Now, once I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and switch in. I'm going to be running everything as root. So just remember, if you're not going to be doing that as root, you're going to have to go ahead and put sudo in the front of every command that you run. So again, I'm going to be doing it as root. So to switch to root, all I have to do is run sudo su, and I'm going to put dash here, and that will bring me straight into the root user's home directory. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen before I run my first command. And now that my screen is all cleaned up and stuff, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I will add some firewall rules here. So since Ubuntu by default on Oracle Cloud comes with IP tables turned on and most of the ports are blocked, I'm going to need to go ahead and open these two ports, the 8008 and 8443. And to do that, you're going to have to access a file called rules v4, and that file is located in etc IP tables and then rules v4. And it seems like Nano doesn't come pre-installed in Ubuntu, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly install Nano. I guess the first thing you need to do is run apt update, and then you can go ahead and install Nano. And once you have Nano installed, then you can go ahead and run nano etc IP tables rules v4, and that should open the IP tables configuration file. And down here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open a couple of empty lines here like this. And I'm going to go here and copy this rule here for port 22. And I'm going to do one more copy of it. And here I'm just going to replace this port 22 with 8008 and 8448. And again, I'm just temporarily going to do the two ports. Eventually, we can turn off the port 8008, as it is an unencrypted, and we don't want to have our unencrypted communications over the internet. Now, once you have this set up, you can go ahead and close this file. Make sure to save the changes. Oh, and one thing just to remind you quickly here is make sure that when you're creating these two new rules, make sure you don't replace this rule here for port 22. I've seen people doing it by accident, and then they lose their access to their instance via SSH, and it's a hassle to get access back to your instance. So make sure that you don't delete or replace this line here, okay? So again, once you have the changes done here, go ahead and save your file. And when you save your file, the next thing that you want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and reload this configuration file into your IP tables running configuration. That way, IP tables will know about these changes that we just made. And to do that, all we need to do is run IP tables -restore, and you can follow it by path to your configuration file, just like this. You can go ahead and run that, and once that's done, you can move on to the next step, and the next step will be to go ahead and install Docker. Now, before installing Docker, we're going to have to go ahead and add Docker's official GPG key. To do that, we're going to have to run the following command. And this is kind of a long command, so I'm just going to copy and paste it, but I'm also going to put this in the description under the video, so you should be able to just copy and paste. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that. And once we have that official GPG key added, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the latest Docker repository. So again, a little bit longer command, so I'm just going to copy and paste. And again, I will put it in the link in the description under the video, so that way, again, just copy and paste. And once you have all that done, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install the Docker and a bunch of Docker plugins that will be needed. And to do that, you need to run this command here. Again, I'll copy and paste to make this go quicker. And you can say yes here. And once Docker is installed, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen here for better visibility. And the next thing that you want to do is we're going to go ahead and create a file called docker-compose YAML. And we're going to use that file to start our Docker container. So go ahead and run this command, nano docker-compose.yml. And in that file, we're going to put the following text. Again, I will have all this under the video. Now with this, what we're going to do is we're basically going to pull this matrix.org Synapse image from Docker. We're going to map a couple of ports, again, this 8008 and 884 from our Oracle instance to our Docker container. We will share directory data and we will mount it as a volume to our container, and there's a couple of environmental variables that are required. One thing you got to remember here is make sure to replace this where it says matrix.techtutelage.net with your domain name. In my case, again, I have my domain here, but don't forget to replace this, as if you keep it the way it is, it's not going to work for you. So once you have all this here, you can go ahead and save and close the file. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run a docker compose command that will generate the very basic configuration of our matrix server. So one thing I'm going to show you here is if you list your current directory, right now all we have is this snap directory and this docker compose file that we created earlier. And after we run this docker compose command, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to list this directory and you're going to see there's going to be that data directory that I was telling you we're going to be sharing with our Docker container. And then that directory is where our matrix server configuration file will be. And this will be just a very basic config, just enough for us to start our server. So we'll be doing some changes to this file. So if I go ahead and list my directory now, you're going to see that now we have this data directory, and I'm going to go ahead and cd into that directory. And if I list that directory, you're going to see there's only 3 files here. And the file that we want to put our attention on is this home server YAML file. So I'm going to go ahead and nano this file. And in this file is where our configuration is. So I'm going to go down here, and there's the first thing that I want to do in this file is I'm going to create a second listener. As you can see right now, we only have this one listener here that opens our server to listen on port 8008. So I'm going to create a second listener, and that second listener will open port 8448 and it will enable TLS. The rest of the configuration here, you can keep it the same. Now, very important thing, once you enable that port 8448, in order to start your server, you're going to need to provide a SSL key and certificate. And to do that, we're going to have to add this following 2 lines here. So this first line is where we're going to provide the path to our certificate. Again, it has to be the full chain. And on the second line here, we're going to provide our key. And again, this key and certificate we will put into our data directory. Now, once we have these 2 lines added, there's going to be one more thing that I want to mention here is now for this video, I'm going to use the SQLite database. But if you're going to be making a production server, you're probably going to want to change this here and use an external SQL server. And if you're interested in how to do that, let me know and I can make another video on that topic. I just want to keep this video short, so I'm not going to go in details on how to set up a separate SQL server, as SQLite is good enough for a small matrix server. It will handle probably up to a couple hundred users with no problem. Then I'm just going to go ahead all the way down here to the bottom of the file, and I'm going to add a couple more lines. Again, not a requirement, but I'm going to put them here just for example of what configurations you can do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enable registration. So I'm just going to do, again, very basic config here. So I'm just going to enable registration, and I'm going to turn off the verification. And this is not the safest way to do it, but since this is just an example on how to get your server up and going, this is how I'm going to do it. It's the fastest thing to do. And again, if you're going to be making a production server, you're going to want to have this more secure. Of course, you're going to turn on registration verification. You're going to probably put some other security features like rate limiting and that kind of stuff. Again, not a topic of this video. So once you have all this added to this file, we can go ahead and save the file and close it. The next thing that we want to do is go ahead and add our SSL key and certificate with the food chain to our data directory. So I'm going to go back to the file here just to make sure that I get the names of my files right. So I'm going to scroll down here just to make sure. So I called my cert and the key is going to be key. So I'm going to go ahead and exit here and I'm going to make my first file here. So I'm going to say nano cert.pem. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to paste my entire certificate chain. And as you can see, this is the whole chain, it's not just the cert. And once you have this done, you can go ahead, save the file and close it. And I'm going to create another file here for my key. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste my key. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and close and save. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that your container has permissions to access these two files. And as you can see now, they're owned by my root user. So I'm going to run command here and I'm going to change the owner of these two files to this 991 user. If in your case, this is a different number here, make sure to change it to whatever your system shows here. So in my case, the user that I want to own these files would be this 991 user. So to do that, all I have to do is run chmod 991 for the user and 991 for the group. And then you can just give it the name of the file like this. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done chmod. I'm changing the ownership. So it has to be chown. Sorry about that. So we can change the owner and the group of that file to 991. And then we're going to do the same thing for our key file. There you go. And if I list my directory now, you can see that the cert and the key are now both owned by this 991 user. And once we have all that done, we can simply go ahead and start our Docker container. And to do that, all we have to do is run the following command, docker-compose up-d. And here you can give it a minute or so, and then you can go ahead and run docker ps. And if everything was all right, our container should be up and running. And then we can go ahead now and check to confirm that our Docker server is up and running and it's accessible on the internet. So I'm going to go back to my browser here and I'm going to go to matrix.techtutelage.net and I'm going to try to access my server on port 8008. And as you can see, I see this great message here that says it works, which means that I'm able to connect to my server. And now I'm going to go ahead and check my HTTPS to make sure that I can connect via encrypted socket. And I'm going to change the port here to 8443. I'm sorry, to 8448. And as you can see, it is working over the SSL as well. And I have a valid certificate. Now, this one thing I want to say here is if you don't have a valid certificate and a DNS name, you can keep running your server on port 008, which is not recommended as it's not safe and your federations won't work. But if you do have a domain name and if you do have a valid certificate and you are able to get it to work over HTTPS, one thing I'll recommend to you is to go ahead and to turn off that listener on port 8008. And to do that, again, all you need to do is go back into this home server YAML file. And in here, all we need to do is comment out this section here where we enable that 8008 listener. And once you have this commented out, you can go ahead and save. And then the next thing that you want to do is go ahead and restart your Matrix server. And to do that, all you have to do is run docker-compose restart matrix. That will restart your server. And now if you go back here and try to connect over HTTP on port 8008, this should fail. And I think it's not failing because it's cached. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new window and try to do it in it. So HTTP matrix.techtutelage.net 8008. And as you can see, the site can't be reached, and that's because we turned off that port 8008. Let me try to add a new, if I open it in a new tab. Yeah, I think it's still cached. But anyway, you can see that if I open it in a new browser, it is not working. So once we have this done here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and change to 8448, and I'm gonna change this to HTTPS. And once you have this all done, you can go ahead and test your server. So to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and click on this link here, and I'm just gonna use a web client, but if you have a downloaded client in your system, you can try to do that too. So I'm gonna go ahead and use Element. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on this Element box here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and open my browser client. And then here I'm going to go ahead and click on sign in. And then I'm going to click on edit here. And here I'm going to add the name of my server. Delete this last part here. All I need is this first part. Oh, and actually this needs to be the 8443, right? So I'm going to do https matrix.techtutelage.net on port 8443. And if I click on continue and if everything is working, this should ask me to enter my user. Oops, that's the wrong port, 8448. There we go. Now it's asking me for my user. Now, since we enabled the registration, I should be able to register a new user. To do that, all I have to do is click on create an account here. And then you can pick a username. So I'm going to call mine user1. It's very creative. And pick a password for him. And go ahead and click on register, and that will create a new user for me, and it will automatically log me in. So I'm going to go ahead and click on skip here, and I don't want to save this password. I'm going to click on no here, and as you can see, I'm logged in, connected to my server. And if I go ahead here and, for example, search for public spaces, let's see if our federation is working, and I select, let's say, the Gitter IAM server, I should see all the spaces that are public there. There you go. So it seems like my federation is working, so I can connect to any of those and communicate with them. Now, the next thing I want to quickly show you is how to create yourself an administrator user. So to do that, you're going to have to go back to your server, and you're going to have to connect to your container. And to do that, what you want to do is run the following command: docker exec-it. And then here we're going to pass the container ID, and then we're going to say bin/bash. And as you can see now, we're connected to our Docker container. And then here we're going to run the following command to create a new admin user. And here you can give your user a name. So I can just leave it to default. That way I'm going to set up my root user. So if you don't put a name here, it will create a root user. So in my case, I'll leave it blank. So I'm going to just hit enter here. I'm going to pick a password for my user. Make sure you pick a strong password. And my password didn't match, so let's try to run it one more time. Again, we're going to keep the root user. And here where it says make admin, if you just hit enter, that won't be an admin user. So in my case, I want my root user to be admin, so I'm going to say yes. And that did not work. Let's see what is going on. Oh, that is because I turned off that port 008. So let me go back here. I'm going to need to go and open temporarily that port so I can create my admin user. So let me go back here into this configuration file, and I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to open this port 8008. Sorry about that. That was my bad. Should have created the user first. I'm going to restart my server, and then now I'm going to go back into my container, and I'm going to run this command, and now I'm going to say yes, and this time it should work. There we go. And now my root user is created. So now that I have my root user created, I'm actually going to go ahead here and I will open a new window, and in this window now I'm going to go to https://matrix.techtutelage.net and port 8448. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open a new client here. This time I'm just going to use Fluffy Chat. And again, I'm going to use the in-browser client. And to connect, I'm going to go ahead and grab my server address from here. And I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. And I'm going to sign in with username and password. And here I'm going to try to sign in with my root user. And there it goes. You can see I can connect with my root user to my server. And I'm going to go ahead and just to test it, I'm going to send a message to my user1 user. And to do that, all you need to do is get your server address like this, just so you don't have to type it. And you can say at user1 and then followed by the name of your server. And I can start a conversation with that user. And I can say hello. And I'm going to go ahead and send this message. And now if I go back to my other browser, I should get this message. Let's see if I go ahead and click here. And as you can see, I got a message from my root user. And if I go ahead and click here, I will see the message. And I can say hello back. And if I bring my other browser, you can see that we got that message back. And this is how you build your own matrix server on Oracle Cloud free tier instance. I hope this video was useful to you. Please go ahead and subscribe for my channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, please go ahead and let me know.